This is the lecture on geoprocessing for Introduction to GIS at St. Charles Community College. So today we're going to work on a few geoprocessing tools. We won't go over all of them. The dialog boxes are fairly similar. So really, once you get the hang of how to enter data into the dialog box, you can do really all the rest of them. So we'll practice with a few just so you get the idea. The first that we're going to look at is the geoprocessing tool that's referred to as dissolve. And if you think about the word, it does exactly that. It takes lines that are drawn within a feature class and basically erases them. This is a very useful tool if you need to make a perimeter line. So for example, if you have a database, right now I have loaded in a database that is block groups, for example. It's a very large database, so if you draw it, it does take a minute to draw the items out. So often I just leave it undrawn, even though it is in my project. These are census designated areas that's referred to as a block group. When you do a dissolve, the idea is you are combining areas into a larger space. This is often used in subdivision redrawings or creating a larger perimeter around a subdivision by using the individual lot lines to combine with. For all dissolve processes, you need to have what's referred to as a common field, which means that within the, in this case, block group, there is a common field that they all have. So for example, if I look at this green area, these green lines here that designate the block group, let's say that I want to find all of the block groups, or I want to combine block groups so that they create a border around the county. I do not have a county line here, I have a state line, but if I were to need a county line, I could combine the block groups within the same county to do so. But that would mean that within the database, they would need to have a common field that identifies their county. So in this case, if I open up the table for block group, we have a field that represents their state. This is what's referred to as the FIPS code. All states and counties, and in fact all the way down to tract, has an individual number associated with it. There's also a county number. So here for this particular record, we have the state number 15, county number 001. Then there's always a combined section. So this is the state and the county FIPS code. And this would be the category that we would be interested in. So what we would do is we would have the computer combine all of these state, county FIPS codes together. Now if I did that for all the states of the country, it would create a county line for all of the states. So what we're going to do first is narrow down our search and just do the states that are within, just do the counties that are within the state of Missouri. So to do that, first I need to do a selection to separate out just the Missouri counties and block groups that are within the state of Missouri. So I'm going to go to my select by attribute. We worked through this process when we did our selections. Again, with attribute, we have to identify what field it is that we want to manipulate, and I've already selected block groups here. Then remember, it's double, single, and I'll get my unique values for double. So I want the state to equal, now I happen to know the FIPS code for the state of Missouri. If you don't, you would have to find that out previous to this. Happens to be 29. So my sentence down here reads state FIPS equals 29, which means the computer is going to look into the database for block groups, and for every record where the state equals, in this case Missouri, it will select those. So we'll go ahead and apply that process, and what we end up with is a selection just for Missouri. Now remember, at this point, any action that I ask of the computer will only be performed on the selected records, in this case the block groups that are within the state of Missouri. So the dissolve process itself is actually quite simple. We have talked about tools in the past. We've used the buffer tool up here under our geoprocessing tab. We're going to move down here to our dissolve tool. This dialog box is fairly simple. Again, if you click in the white, the help on the right-hand side will help you understand what you are to put in here. So the first question that it asks is, which database are you going to dissolve features in? And we're going to select block groups. And remember, since we have made a selection within that feature class, it will only perform the action on that feature class. Then we will need to find a safe place. As usual, this process is much preferred to be inside of a CAN or inside a personal geodatabase. If you don't have a fresh one, if you don't have one at all, or if you've forgotten where you've put other ones, go ahead out of here into ARC catalog, make one, come back into here and start the process over again. Often, just as a side note, whenever you start a new project and you're making a new folder for your exercise for that week, I often just go ahead and make a personal geo database right away so that it's in there and it's ready, so that when I get to a point like this, I don't have to backtrack all the way out and make one. It's just an easy thing to do. So I already have one here. I'm going to give it a reasonable name. So I'm going to call it Missouri Counties, because that's what it will end up being. I will go ahead and save it. Now the next field, this dissolve section here, this is where I need to identify what my common field is. So in this case, it's my state county FIPS code. They will all have the same state and county FIPS code. So I've identified it's going to be the selected features within block group, identified a safe place, identified the common field, and then I select OK. This process can take a minute. You can see the dissolve scroll down here at the bottom. So just be patient. It can take just a minute. Once the process is complete, you will get a notification in the bottom right corner, hopefully with a check mark, that says that the process has been complete. So I'm going to go ahead and undraw my block groups, and what we have now is a new feature class that is our Missouri counties that identifies the Missouri county lines for us. Now, as noted in the lecture notes, you do lose data. For all of the block group information that we had before, that is now combined. There are a lot of block groups that are combined within a single county. So all of that individual data for the block groups has been deleted, is no longer in this feature class. It's still in the block group feature class. It's just not in our new one. But remember, that's okay, because we did not make this to get block group data. We just made this to get a perimeter line, which we can now use for other things. So dissolve is useful. It has its place, but just remember that you do lose some data with it. The next action that we will try is a geoprocessing tool referred to as merge. So I'm going to go ahead and undraw some things here just so that we can get a better sense of where we are in the world. I've loaded not only the United States, but also the Mexican states down here. Their perimeter lines look a little different, just to show the differences between them. What we have the ability to do with merge is to, instead of having two separate feature classes, one for Mexican states here and one for United States here, merge allows us to combine them and have all of that data in a single feature class. Again, it's a fairly simple process under the Geoprocessing tab. We just come down to the merge option. The first section here asks us to identify which feature classes we want to merge together. So we'll just go into our list here and select both Mexican states and United States so that it knows we wish to have both of them. You need to do these individually and they will show themselves down here in the list. If you have more, keep going and just list all of the feature classes you want to merge. Again, we need to find a safe place, again, inside a personal geodatabase. So I will call this North America. It's not quite, we're skipping Canada, but just for sake of ease. And save that. And the rest of this we can really skip. There are some other choices you can make, but really that's all we need to do. And then we select OK. Again, we have a scrolling identifier down here that says that it is working on it. And when it is complete, we can actually delete our, or not delete, but undraw our United and our Mexican states, and we end up with a single feature class that has both of them together. If we open our attribute table in this case, instead of losing data the way that we did in dissolve, in this case we just combined data. Now we have to be a little bit careful with how we interpret this. All of the fields are listed here, but for example in this case we have the Mexican states that show up first here, and some of this data is specific just to the United States. So of course the Mexican states would not have data for that. It only is populated with the data that was there for the Mexican states. Now when we get down in the list here and down to the United States, so here we have our individual United States here, any field that was specific to the Mexican states will be blank. So again, everything is here, but if the data does not show up in both records, then you would only see part of it. So merge is also a very useful tool. The last geoprocessor that we're going to cover today is CLIP. And CLIP is also one that we will use fairly regularly, and that is also quite simple, but we do have to go through a little bit of process for it. So with CLIP, we need to think about it in terms of a cookie cutter. I'm going to zoom in here just so that we can speed through this a little bit more quickly into the Missouri section that we're looking at. So what we have here is what's referred to as the CBSA. It's the Census Bureau Statistical Area. In general, it's metropolitan regions. So this one right here, I'll highlight it for you, is the St. Louis metropolitan area. Note it highlighted the state of Missouri and the St. Louis metropolitan area. So for example, if I wanted to clip out the block groups that existed just within the statistical area, the urban space of St. Louis, I would need to think of it as a cookie cutter. Now the shape of my cookie cutter is going to be the statistical area of St. Louis. So again, the first thing I need to do is separate that out. So we're going to go into the statistical area of St. Louis and do a select by attribute. I'm going to select CBSA. I'm going to say that name equals, I'm going to get my unique values and scroll down to St. Louis. Whoops. St. Louis. And so again, what it will do is it will select that region out, and keep in mind that means that it will only do an action on that region at this point. So if you will, I have too many block groups and only a single cookie cutter shape of the St. Louis metropolitan area. And then again, we just go through a fairly simple dialog box here. The input feature in this case is the feature class that is, if you will, too big. So in this case for us, that is going to be block group. We have too many block groups. We only want the block groups for the St. Louis metropolitan area. The clip features is going to be which feature class is going to be the one to clip. Oh, and I chose the wrong one. It should be CBSA. And then again, we need to define a safe spot for it. So we'll refer to this as STL Metro block groups, and you want to be as specific as you can with your names. So we will give that a try. Again, you can see the scrolling down here as it works on this. Now this process takes a while, so you will need to wait just a minute for this one. Again, once the process is complete, you will get notification of that down in the bottom right corner, and you will get a new feature class in your table of contents. So again, if I undraw the block groups here, and even if I undraw the CBSA, we can see that now we have a perfect representation of the area that we're interested in. So clip is also very useful. If we open up the attribute table for this, we have all of the data. It in essence just copied the data from what we clipped it from, block groups, but just eliminated the space that we were not interested in. So that concludes the geoprocessing lecture. Again, there are others, intersect, union, a few more up here, but the process is very similar.